They say a stranger's shoulder is the last place you ever fall asleep unless you've completely run out of strength. But no one on that midnight flight understood just how far gone she was until it happened. And then everything changed. A billionaire who trusts no one finds a stranger asleep on his shoulder mid-flight. And in that quiet moment, he makes a decision that will quietly rewrite both of their lives forever. The cabin lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow as the plane cruised at 37,000 feet, most passengers wrapped in blankets or lost in restless sleep. But Claire Whitmore hadn't slept in what felt like days, maybe longer, her arms carefully cradling Liam and Lily, her 6-month-old twins who had finally drifted off after hours of gentle rocking and whispered lullabies, her body angled awkwardly in the narrow economy seat, her back aching, her eyes burning. Every ounce of her energy spent just keeping them calm, safe, and warm, and somewhere between. Exhaustion and relief. Her head slowly tilted, her defenses slipping for the first time all night, until it came to rest against the shoulder of the man beside her. Adrian Cole didn't move at first. Not because he didn't notice, but because he did. Immediately, the weight of her head light but unmistakable against his tailored jacket, the faint scent of baby powder, and something softer, something human, something real. And for a man who built his life on control, on distance, on never allowing anything unpredictable too close, this should have annoyed him. He should have shifted, cleared his throat, gently nudged her awake. But he didn't. Instead, he turned his gaze slightly, studying the woman who had unknowingly crossed a line no one ever crossed with him. Her face pale with fatigue, her hair loosely pulled back, strands falling freely as if she had stopped caring hours ago, maybe days ago, and in her arms. The two small lives she guarded so fiercely, their tiny hands curled into the fabric of her sweater, as if they knew she was the only constant they had. A flight attendant passed by, pausing briefly when she recognized Adrian, her posture straightening instantly, her voice lowering into something overly respectful. But Adrian gave the slightest shake of his head, a silent instruction not to disturb them, and for once, the world listened, leaving the three of them in a quiet pocket untouched by status or expectation. Claire stirred slightly, her brow tightening as one of the babies shifted, a soft whimper escaping before she instinctively adjusted her hold without waking, her body responding even in sleep, and something about that simple act tightened something unfamiliar in Adrian's chest, something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever, because this wasn't calculated. It wasn't strategic, it wasn't part of a deal or a negotiation, it was raw, unfiltered responsibility, the kind that didn't ask for recognition or reward. Outside the window, the sky stretched endlessly dark, scattered with distant stars, but inside that narrow row of seats, something quieter and far more unexpected was unfolding. Because for the first time in a very long time, Adrian Cole wasn't thinking about numbers or power or the next acquisition. He was thinking about a woman who looked like she had been carrying the entire world alone, and somehow, without asking, without knowing, had trusted him just enough to rest. And he found himself doing something even more unusual. He stayed completely still, careful not to wake her, as if protecting that fragile moment mattered more than anything waiting for him on the ground. Because deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, he knew this wasn't just a coincidence. This was the beginning of something neither of them had planned, and neither of them would be able to walk away from once it truly began. Adrian remained still long after he should have shifted, his shoulder growing slightly numb, but his attention fixed entirely on the quiet, fragile scene beside him, because something about the way Claire held those two babies felt different from anything he had ever witnessed. It was not polished or practiced. It was instinctive, almost protective in a way that made everything else around them feel distant and unimportant. And when the seatbelt sign flickered on with a soft chime as the plane began its gradual descent, the subtle change in motion caused one of the twins, Lily, to stir, her tiny face tightening before a soft cry escaped into the dim cabin. And Claire woke instantly, as if she had never truly been asleep at all, her head lifting abruptly from Adrian's shoulder as she blinked in confusion for half a second before reality rushed back in. and with it embarrassment. "Oh my God. I am so sorry," she whispered quickly, her voice hoarse from exhaustion as she adjusted Lily and reached for Liam at the same time, her movements careful but rushed, as if apologizing fast enough might undo what had already happened. But Adrian simply turned slightly toward her, his expression calm, almost unreadable. "You did not disturb me," he said quietly, his tone even, steady, the kind that did not invite panic or shame. And for a brief second, Claire paused, surprised because she had expected annoyance, maybe even irritation, not this quiet acceptance, not this absence of judgment. Lily's soft cries grew a little louder, and Claire instinctively began to rock her, whispering gentle reassurances under her breath while trying to keep Liam asleep with her other arm. But the tight space made everything harder, her elbow brushing against the armrest, her movements restricted, and the strain showed despite how hard she tried to hide it, and it did not go unnoticed because Adrian watched carefully, noticing how she adjusted her posture to shield the babies from the cold air vent above, how she used her own body as a barrier without thinking, and before Claire could struggle any longer, he reached up and subtly adjusted the vent, redirecting the airflow away from them, his movement smooth, almost invisible, but Claire noticed, her eyes flickering toward him again. Softer this time. "Thank you," she said. Quieter now, less rushed, and for the first time, there was something else in her voice besides exhaustion, something closer to relief. A few rows ahead, a passenger turned with a faint look of annoyance at the sound of the baby, and a flight attendant began making her way down the aisle, her expression already tightening in that polite but impatient way. But Adrian spoke before she could say a word, his voice low but firm. "Could we get some warm water and an extra blanket, please?" And the shift in tone was immediate, the attendant recognizing him. Instantly, her posture straightening, her response quick and accommodating. "Of course, right away," she replied, and Claire caught the exchange, the subtle change in how the world responded to him, and it made her hesitate, not out of curiosity, but caution, because she had seen that kind of influence before, and it rarely came without conditions. But Adrian did not look at her like someone calculating a favor. He simply leaned back slightly, giving her more space, as if making sure she did not feel cornered. And that small, thoughtful distance did more to earn her trust than anything else could have. Within minutes, the blanket arrived, soft and warm, and Claire carefully draped it over Liam and Lily, her hands lingering for a moment as she checked their temperature, her fingers brushing their cheeks with quiet tenderness. And for the first time since the flight began, her shoulders lowered. Just a fraction, the tension easing, and Adrian noticed that too. The way relief softened her features, the way she exhaled slowly, as if she had been holding her breath for hours. And he found himself asking a question he normally would never ask a stranger. "How old are they?" His voice still calm, still measured, but carrying a trace of something unfamiliar, something almost human in its curiosity. And Claire glanced at him again, this time not with embarrassment, not with fear, but with a quiet, cautious openness. "6 months," she answered softly, adjusting Lily against her shoulder. "They are twins." And Adrian gave a slight nod, his gaze resting briefly on the 2 sleeping children before returning to her. And in that moment, somewhere between 37,000 feet and the quiet hum of the descending aircraft, the distance between 2 completely different worlds began to narrow in a way neither of them fully understood yet, but both of them had already started to feel. The plane touched down with a soft but unmistakable jolt, the kind that gently pulled every passenger back into reality. And as the wheels rolled along the runway, Claire Whitmore instinctively tightened her hold on Liam and Lily, her body shifting into alertness even before the cabin lights brightened, because rest, for her, was never complete. It was always temporary, always ready to be interrupted. And as the aircraft slowed, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their arrival, a quiet wave of movement passed through the cabin, seat belts clicking open, overhead bins unlocking, people standing too early, eager to leave, but Claire remained seated, her focus entirely on her children as she carefully adjusted the blanket around them, checking their faces, brushing her fingers lightly against their cheeks, as if confirming they were still peaceful, still okay, and beside her. Adrian Cole watched without saying anything, noticing how she did not rush, how she did not follow the urgency of everyone else, because her world moved at a different pace, one defined by two small lives instead of schedules and priorities. When the aisle finally began to clear, Claire hesitated before standing, shifting Liam slightly, so she could reach for her worn diaper bag tucked under the seat, the strap frayed at the edges, the weight of it heavier than it should have been, and as she tried to balance everything at once, Adrian stood first, stepping slightly into the aisle, but not moving ahead, creating just enough space for her to gather herself without pressure, a small gesture that again felt deliberate, considerate, and quietly protective. And when she rose carefully, managing both babies with practiced precision, she gave him a brief glance. "Thank you again," she said, her voice still soft but steadier now, and Adrian simply gave a small nod, as if none of it required acknowledgement, as if helping her had not been an effort at all. As they moved slowly toward the exit, the contrast between them became more visible. Adrian in his tailored coat, composed and effortless, and Claire in her simple, slightly worn clothes, her focus divided between every small movement of Liam and Lily. Yet there was something about the way she carried herself that did not feel small. It felt grounded, resilient, and when they finally stepped off the plane into the terminal, the cool air brushing against them, reality seemed to return. All at once, brighter lights, louder sounds, the distant echo of rolling suitcases and announcements. And Claire paused just past the gate, shifting her weight as she looked around, scanning the crowd with a flicker of uncertainty that she quickly tried to hide. But Adrian noticed it immediately, the way her eyes searched not for comfort, but for direction, for something she might have been expecting that was not there. A few passengers passed by them, some glancing briefly at Adrian with recognition, others at Claire with quiet curiosity, and for a moment, neither of them spoke, as if both understood that whatever existed between them on that plane might end right here, in this ordinary, crowded terminal. But then Liam stirred slightly, letting out a soft, restless sound, and Claire adjusted him quickly, whispering to soothe him, her attention returning fully to her children. And in that moment, Adrian realized something with unexpected clarity. She was already preparing to do this alone again. Whatever came next, wherever she needed to go, she would carry it without asking for help, without expecting anyone to step in. And for reasons he could not fully explain, that realization did not sit well with him. Because somewhere between that quiet flight and this crowded arrival hall, Claire Whitmore had become more than just a stranger who had fallen asleep on his shoulder. She had become someone he could not simply walk away from. And as she adjusted her grip and took a small step forward, ready to disappear into the moving crowd, Adrian spoke again, his voice calm but unmistakably intentional. "Do you have someone meeting you?" And the question lingered between them, simple on the surface, but carrying the weight of everything that had not yet been said. Claire froze for just a fraction of a second when she heard Adrian's question, not because it was intrusive, but because it was simple, and simple questions were often the hardest to answer honestly, especially when the truth was uncertain, and she shifted Liam slightly higher against her shoulder before responding, her voice careful, measured. "I was supposed to," she said quietly, her eyes flickering once more across the moving crowd, as if hoping someone might suddenly appear and make her answer feel less incomplete. But no one did. And that silence said more than any explanation could, and Adrian did not press her. He simply observed the way her grip tightened ever so slightly, the way she adjusted the diaper bag strap again, even though it was already secure, small signs that she was bracing herself for whatever came next. Alone, a nearby announcement echoed through the terminal, calling out baggage claim information, and the steady flow of passengers continued around them. People reuniting, laughing, moving with purpose, while Claire stood just off to the side, caught between staying and moving, between waiting and accepting. And then Lily stirred again, her small face scrunching as a soft cry began to build, and Claire immediately shifted into motion, rocking her gently, whispering soothing words under her breath, her attention narrowing once more to the two tiny lives that depended on her completely. And in that moment, any hesitation she had about her situation disappeared, replaced by quiet determination, because regardless of what had gone wrong, she still had to keep going. Adrian watched her for another second before speaking again, his tone steady but more deliberate now. "Where are you headed?" And this time, Claire hesitated longer, not because she did not know, but because she was weighing how much to reveal, how much to trust a man she had met only hours ago. And yet, something about the way he stood there, not crowding her, not rushing her, made it easier to answer than she expected. "Downtown," she said. Softly, "I had a place arranged." The slight pause before the last word enough to suggest that arrangement was no longer certain, and Adrian nodded once, processing more than she had actually said, because uncertainty like that, especially at this hour, with two infants, was not something to ignore. A family passed by them, greeting each other with warm embraces, laughter filling the space for a brief moment. And Claire instinctively turned slightly away, not out of envy, but out of habit, as if she had learned to step aside for moments that did not belong to her. And Adrian noticed that too. The quiet way she removed herself from things she was not part of, and it settled something in his mind. A decision forming not from impulse, but from clarity, because walking away now would be easy, expected even, but it would also mean ignoring something he had already begun to understand. That Claire Whitmore was not asking for help, but she needed it, and not in a way that would make her feel small. "It is late," Adrian said calmly, glancing briefly toward the terminal exit where the night waited beyond the glass. "And traveling with two infants at this hour is not simple." His words were neutral, observational, but there was an underlying offer within them, one he had not fully spoken yet. And Claire picked up on immediately, her posture straightening slightly, a quiet reflex of self-protection. "I will manage," she replied gently, not defensive, but firm, because managing was what she had always done, even when it was difficult, especially when it was difficult, and Adrian did not challenge that. He respected it, but he also did not step back. Instead, he adjusted his tone, softer now, more precise. "I'm sure you will," he said, "but you should not have to do it alone tonight." And there was no pressure in his voice, no expectation, just a simple truth offered without weight. And for the first time since landing, Claire looked at him fully, really looked, as if trying to understand what he wanted in return, but she found nothing hidden there, no impatience, no calculation, only quiet certainty, and that made the decision in front of her more complicated than she expected, because trusting a stranger was risky, but continuing alone in a city that had already failed to meet her, with two babies depending on her, might be even more so. And as Liam shifted slightly in her arms and Lily let out another small cry, the balance between caution and necessity began to tip in a way she could no longer ignore. Claire did not answer immediately, because accepting help was never just about the offer, it was about the risk that came with it. And for a moment, the noise of the terminal seemed to fade behind the quiet calculation in her mind, the balance between pride and practicality, between protecting herself and protecting her children. And just as she opened her mouth to respond, her phone vibrated in the side pocket of her bag. The sudden buzz sharp enough to make her flinch slightly, and she carefully shifted Liam to free one hand, pulling the phone out with a sense of urgency she could not hide, her eyes scanning the screen before something in her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough for Adrian to notice a subtle drop, like something expected had just fallen through. She hesitated before answering, then lifted the phone to her ear, turning slightly away but not far enough to escape the tension in her voice. "Hi, I just landed." "Yes, I am at the airport." A pause then. Her brow tightened. "No, I understand, but you said tonight was confirmed." Another pause, longer this time, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more controlled. "I have two babies with me. I cannot just wait until tomorrow." The words hung there, quiet but heavy, and whatever response came through the phone was enough to make her close her eyes briefly, as if steadying herself, before she finally said, "Okay, I understand," and ended the call. For a second, she stood completely still, the phone still in her hand, as the Reality settled in. Her arranged place was no longer available. Not tonight. Not when she needed it most. And that was the first shift, the first real crack in the fragile plan she had been holding on to. And when she looked up again, she quickly composed herself, slipping the phone back in her bag. But the certainty she had been holding on to was gone, replaced by something quieter, more uncertain. Adrian did not ask what happened. He did not need to. The answer was already clear, and before he could speak, the second disruption came, sharper this time, because Lily's soft cries turned suddenly into something more urgent, more distressed, her small body squirming as her face flushed slightly, and Claire's attention snapped back instantly, concern replacing everything else. Hey, it is okay, she whispered quickly, pressing her cheek gently against Lily's head, but the baby did not settle as easily this time, her cries growing in pitch, and Claire's movements became more focused, more tense as she checked her forehead, then reached quickly into the diaper bag, searching for something, anything, her fingers moving faster now, and that was when Adrian saw it clearly. This was not just discomfort, this was fear controlled but real, the kind that comes from knowing you cannot afford for things to go wrong. She feels warm, Claire murmured under her breath, almost to herself, her voice tightening just slightly, and in that moment, the situation shifted from difficult to urgent, because exhaustion could be managed, uncertainty could be endured, but a sick child was something else entirely, and Claire knew it. Adrian stepped closer then, not abruptly, but with purpose, his voice calm but firmer now. "There is a medical station near baggage claim," he said, already glancing toward the signs as if mapping the fastest route, and Claire looked at him, hesitation still there, but now layered with urgency, because whatever boundaries she had been holding onto were starting to blur under the weight of what was happening. And for the first time since they met, her answer came without delay, without careful distance. "Okay," she said softly, the word small but decisive, and that single word changed everything, because it was not just acceptance of help, it was trust, fragile and temporary, but real enough to take the next step. And as Adrian reached to guide the way through the moving crowd, adjusting his pace to match hers, ensuring she had space, ensuring she was not rushed, the invisible line between strangers shifted again, becoming something more connected, more intentional, because now they were no longer just sharing a moment. They were moving forward together into whatever came next. The walk through the terminal felt longer than it should have, not because of the distance, but because every step now carried a different weight. Urgency layered over exhaustion, and Claire Whitmore adjusted her hold on Lily as the baby's cries softened into uneven whimpers, her small face still warm against Claire's shoulder, while Liam remained asleep, unaware of the shift unfolding around him, and Adrian Cole moved just slightly ahead, clearing a path without making it obvious, his presence, steady rather than overwhelming, guiding without taking control. And when they finally reached the medical station tucked near baggage claim, the bright fluorescent lights contrasted sharply with the dim calm of the plane, pulling them fully into the reality of the moment. A nurse behind the counter looked up immediately, her expression softening at the sight of the babies, and Claire stepped forward without hesitation this time, her voice carrying a quiet urgency. "She feels warm, and she has been fussy," and the nurse nodded, already gesturing toward a small examination area. "Let's take a quick look," she said gently, and Claire followed, carefully lowering herself into the chair as she adjusted Lily, her movements protective, instinctive, while Adrian remained just outside the immediate space, not intruding, but not leaving either, his attention fixed on the subtle details most people would miss. The way Claire's hands trembled slightly before steadying, the way she kept her voice calm even as worry pressed in. The nurse checked Lily's temperature with a small digital thermometer, the seconds stretching longer than they should have, until a soft beep broke the silence, and she glanced at the reading before offering a reassuring smile. "It is a mild fever, nothing alarming, likely from travel or fatigue," she explained, her tone calm and practiced. "But you should be kept comfortable, hydrated, and monitored tonight." And Claire nodded quickly, relief washing over her in a quiet wave, her shoulders lowering just slightly, though not completely, because relief for her was never full. It always came with a lingering edge of caution. "Thank you," she said softly, adjusting the blanket around Lily again, her fingers lingering as if grounding herself in the moment. And as the nurse stepped away to gather a small packet of instructions, Adrian moved closer, just enough to be heard without interrupting. "There's a pharmacy just past this area," he said, his voice even. "We can get what she needs before leaving." And Claire glanced at him, the word "we" settling differently now than it had before. No longer distant, no longer hypothetical, but present, real, and for a moment, she did not correct it. As they stepped back into the flow of the terminal, the sounds of rolling suitcases and distant announcements returning around them, Claire felt the weight of everything pressing in again, the canceled arrangement, the uncertainty of where to go, the responsibility that never paused. And yet, something had shifted because she was not navigating it entirely alone in this moment. And that realization was both comforting and unfamiliar. At the pharmacy, Adrian handled the interaction efficiently, but without drawing attention, selecting what was needed while ensuring Claire remained focused on the babies. And when he handed her the small bag, their fingers brushed briefly, a simple contact, but one that carried a quiet acknowledgement of everything that had just happened. And Claire looked at him again, this time not with hesitation, not with guarded distance, but with something softer, something closer to trust. "I will pay you back," she said gently. The words automatic, shaped by habit, and Adrian shook his head slightly. Not dismissive, but firm. "You can another time," he replied, leaving the meaning open, not pressing, not expecting. And as they moved toward the exit once more, the glass doors ahead revealing the dark night beyond, the cool air waiting on the other side, Claire paused for just a second before stepping forward, because what waited outside was still uncertain. But now, for the first time since landing, it did not feel entirely impossible. And beside her, Adrian matched her pace without hesitation. No longer just a stranger from a flight, but someone who had chosen, quietly and deliberately, to stay. The glass doors slid open with a soft mechanical sound, and the cool night air immediately wrapped around them, carrying a faint chill that made Claire instinctively pull the blanket tighter around Liam and Lily, her body adjusting without thought as she stepped outside. The brightness of the terminal fading behind them, replaced by the dim glow of overhead lights reflecting off the pavement. And for a brief moment, she paused just beyond the exit, her eyes scanning the pickup lanes where cars lined up and moved in steady patterns, headlights cutting through the darkness, engines idling, people greeting each other or leaving without hesitation. But Claire remained still, because unlike everyone else, she did not have a clear next step waiting for her. Adrian stood beside her, not speaking immediately, giving her the space to take in a moment to decide how much she was willing to accept. And after a few seconds, he reached in his coat pocket and checked his phone, his movements calm, precise. Then he made a brief call, his voice low and controlled. "I need a car at the arrival's entrance now," he said simply, no explanation, no negotiation, and ended the call just as quickly. And Claire noticed the ease of it, the way solutions seemed to appear for him without effort, and it stirred something complicated inside her. Not resentment, but distance, a reminder of how different their worlds were. "You do not have to do that," she said quietly, her voice steady but careful, as if she was testing the boundary again, making sure she was not stepping into something she could not step out of later. And Adrian looked at her, his expression unchanged but his tone softer. "I know," he replied. "I am choosing to." And the simplicity of that answer left no room for misunderstanding, no hidden expectation, just a clear intention. And Claire held his gaze for a second longer than before, searching for something that might contradict his words. But again, she found nothing but quiet certainty. A black car pulled up within minutes, smooth and understated but unmistakably expensive, the driver stepping out quickly to open the rear door. And Claire hesitated again, not because she did not understand what was being offered, but because accepting it meant stepping fully into a situation she could not fully control. And for someone who had built her life around managing every uncertainty alone, that was not easy. And as she stood there, Lily shifted slightly in her arms, letting out a soft, tired sound. And that small reminder tipped the balance once more, because this was no longer just about her comfort. It was about what was best for them. She stepped forward slowly, carefully getting into the car while keeping both babies secure, her movements deliberate, and Adrian followed only after she was settled, taking the seat beside her without crowding, maintaining that same respectful distance he had kept all along. And as the car pulled away from the curb, merging into the quiet flow of late-night traffic, Claire let out a breath she had not realized she had been holding, her shoulders lowering slightly as the city lights passed by outside the window. Unfamiliar streets stretching ahead, and for the first time since the flight began, she allowed herself to feel something beyond survival, something closer to fragile relief. But even as that feeling settled in, another thought followed closely behind, quieter but persistent, because nothing in her life had ever come without a cost. And as she glanced briefly at Adrian, who sat beside her with the same composed stillness, looking out at the road ahead, she could not help but wonder what this moment would eventually ask of her, what this unexpected kindness might turn into once the night was over, and whether she was stepping into something temporary or something that might change everything. And Adrian, without looking at her, seemed to sense that unspoken question, his voice breaking the silence gently. "We will get you somewhere safe first," he said, not as a promise, but as a fact, and in that simple sentence there was a quiet reassurance that did not try to define the future, only to steady the present. And for now, that was enough to let Claire lean back slightly, her eyes lowering just for a moment as the car carried them forward into a night that no longer felt quite as uncertain as before. The city unfolded outside the car window in a blur of lights and reflections, tall buildings rising against the night sky, while quiet streets stretched between them. And Claire Whitmore watched it all with a distant focus, not because she was taking it in, but because she was trying to steady her thoughts, trying to make sense of how quickly everything had changed in just a few hours, from a delayed flight to a stranger's shoulder, from a canceled arrangement to sitting in the back of a car she never imagined stepping into, and beside her, Adrian. Cole remained composed, his presence steady, almost grounding, yet still unfamiliar in a way that made her careful. Liam shifted softly against her arm, still asleep, while Lily rested more quietly now, the warmth in her cheeks less noticeable, and Claire adjusted the blanket again, her fingers moving gently, instinctively, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to exhale, the tension easing just slightly as the rhythm of the car and the quiet hum of the road created a fragile sense of calm. "We are about 15 minutes out," the driver said from the front, his voice polite and controlled, and Adrian gave a small nod, but Claire's attention sharpened immediately, her gaze flickering toward Adrian. "Where are we going?" she asked softly, not accusing but cautious because she had accepted help, not direction, and Adrian met her eyes without hesitation. "Somewhere safe, private, and quiet," he replied, his tone even. "You and the babies need rest, not uncertainty." And while his words were reasonable, grounded even, they still carried weight, because safety, when offered by someone with power, could sometimes come with conditions she could not see yet. The car slowed as it turned onto a quieter street, the noise of the city fading behind them, replaced by a more refined stillness. And then it came into view, a tall building with a clean, understated exterior, the kind that did not need to announce its value because it was already understood, and Claire felt that shift immediately, the quiet realization of where she was being brought, and her grip tightened slightly around Lily as the car came to a smooth stop. The driver stepped out and opened the door, but Claire did not move right away, her hesitation returning, stronger now, because this was no longer just assistance. This was stepping into Adrian's world, fully and unmistakably, and she looked at him again, searching for something she might have missed. "I cannot stay somewhere like this," she said, gently, her voice firm despite its softness. "It is too much." And for the first time, Adrian did not answer immediately because he understood what she meant, not the words themselves, but the space behind them, the fear of imbalance, of owing something she could not repay. And when he spoke, his tone shifted, quieter, more precise. Then do not think of it as staying, he said. Think of it as resting, just for tonight. And there was a subtle difference in the way he framed it, not offering a solution that would trap her, but one that would allow her to leave without consequence. And Claire felt that distinction, even if she did not fully trust it yet. Before she could respond, another interruption came, quieter but more unsettling, because Lily stirred again, her small hand curling weakly against Claire's sweater as a soft whimper escaped. And Claire's attention snapped back, instantly, her concern overriding everything else. And in that moment, the decision shifted once more, not because she was convinced, but because she could not afford to risk discomfort or instability for her children. And slowly, carefully, she stepped out of the car, the cool night air brushing against her again as she adjusted both babies securely in her arms. Adrian stepped out beside her, but he did not move ahead. He did not guide her inside. He simply stood there, giving her the choice, the space to walk forward on her own terms. And after a brief pause, Claire took that step, moving toward the entrance not as someone being led, but as someone choosing, even if that choice was temporary, even if it was uncertain. And as the doors opened in the quiet, warm interior light spilled out to meet them, the line between two different lives blurred once again, because this was no longer just about getting through the night. This was the beginning of something neither of them could fully control anymore. The lobby was quiet in a way that felt almost unreal, soft lighting reflecting off polished floors, the faint scent of something clean and subtle in the air. And Claire Whitmore stepped inside slowly, her footsteps careful, measured, as if she was aware that she did not quite belong in a place like this. Yet she kept moving because stopping was no longer an option. Not tonight, not with Liam and Lily depending on her to keep going. And behind her, the doors closed gently, sealing off the noise of the outside world, leaving only a calm stillness that felt both comforting and unfamiliar. Adrian Cole walked beside her, but not ahead, his presence steady, allowing her to take each step at her own pace. And as they approached the reception desk, a staff member greeted him with quiet recognition, their posture immediately shifting into something more attentive. But Adrian did not linger. He spoke briefly, efficiently, arranging everything without drawing unnecessary attention. And within moments, a key card was placed in his hand, the process seamless, controlled, and far removed from the uncertainty Claire had been navigating all night. When they entered the elevator, the doors sliding shut with a soft sound. The enclosed space brought a different kind of silence, one that felt more personal, more immediate, and Claire shifted slightly, adjusting Lily against her shoulder while glancing at the mirrored walls, catching a glimpse of herself for the first time since the flight, her hair slightly undone, her clothes worn from travel, her eyes carrying the weight of exhaustion. And for a brief second, doubt surfaced again, quiet but persistent, because standing next to Adrian in that reflection made the difference between their worlds impossible to ignore. And she lowered her gaze, focusing instead on the steady rise of the elevator as the numbers changed above the door. When it finally stopped, Adrian stepped aside first, allowing her to exit ahead of him. And they moved down a quiet hallway before he opened the door to a suite that felt more like a private apartment than a temporary space. Warm lighting, soft furnishings, a calm atmosphere that immediately contrasted everything she had experienced that day. And Claire paused just inside the entrance, not moving further because this was the moment where everything became real, where accepting help turned into occupying space within it. And she looked at him again, her voice soft but clear. "I will leave in the morning," she said, not as a rejection, but as a boundary, something she needed to hold on to. And Adrian met her gaze with the same calm steadiness. "You can leave whenever you want," he replied. No hesitation, no resistance, just acknowledgement. And that simple answer removed the last unspoken pressure she had been carrying. Lily stirred slightly again, her small hand curling instinctively, and Claire moved further into the room, guided not by comfort, but by necessity, gently laying both babies down on the bed for a moment, so she could adjust their blankets more securely, her hands moving with practiced care, checking their temperature, their breathing, every small detail that mattered more than anything else. And as she did, Adrian remained near the doorway, giving her space, not intruding on that quiet, intimate routine, but watching just enough to understand, to recognize that this was not just a mother caring for her children. This was someone who had learned to carry everything alone and had never allowed herself to falter. When Claire finally straightened, she exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering just slightly. And for the first time since the night began, there was a stillness in her that was not forced, not held together by effort, but real, even if fragile. And she glanced toward Adrian again, her expression softer now, not guarded in the same way as before. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words simple but carrying everything she could not fully express. And Adrian gave a small nod, his gaze steady but thoughtful, because in that moment he understood something with absolute clarity. This was never about offering help for a single night. This was something that had already gone deeper than either of them had planned. And as he turned slightly toward the door, giving her the space to rest without obligation, the silence between them was no longer empty. It was filled with something unspoken, something beginning, because neither of them knew what would happen after this night. But both of them knew, in a way they could not ignore, that walking away would not be as simple as it once would have been.